Shalom, shalom, and welcome to this evening's Torah and Customs class, part 11. Tonight we're going to study the Torah reading called Bo. That is in Exodus chapter 10, verse 1 through chapter 13, verse 16. We want to welcome you here and thank you for joining us, and have your hearts and minds ready to receive the truth and the knowledge and wisdom that comes from Yahweh. May you be ready to receive and retain it. We're going to get started here shortly. Please stand by.
Well, greetings from Austin, Texas and vicinity. This is the vicinity, Manor. We have a good time here tonight studying God's Word. If you've been with us before, welcome back. And if you've never been here before, get ready for a nice time of learning and studying a little bit about Hebrew as well as God's Word, and see the reality of God. So we'll start off with a little prayer to start off with, because I believe in the reality of God, and if we pray and ask Him, He will show us mysteries of His language and His teachings. Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, our Father who is in the heavens, we thank you, Lord, for your grace, for your word, for your Torah, for the teachers that have gone before us. And we ask you, Lord, to be with us tonight as we study. Help us to truly get to the depth of your word, and help us to see why the Bible is such an exciting book after almost 4,000 years. Part of it is 4,000 years old, and part of it is written a little later than that, but we love the whole word. It's all mysteries and secrets and an expose of you and your kingdom. So we thank you for it, Lord. Help us to really get into the study tonight and to learn more about you, and to teach us the things you want us to learn this evening. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, I pray. Why don't you just repeat after me, and everybody else online will too. Everyone say, Father, I'm hungry.
Father, I'm hungry.
I would like some spiritual food.
I would like some spiritual food.
And I'm thirsty, Lord.
And I'm thirsty, Lord.
Give me living waters.
Give me living waters,
so I'll have plenty to give to others.
so I have plenty to give to others.
In the name of Messiah Yeshua.
In the name of Messiah Yeshua.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Well, one of my loyal, faithful students is in Las Vegas on a business trip, and another one is in the hospital right now with a little liquid around the heart and little things that are going on with his body. But they had it pretty well straightened out last night by the time I left the hospital, and his heart specialist was supposed to come in today and finish the process up, and so we'll see how good he can feel when we get through here. Tonight's Torah study begins with Exodus chapter 10 and verse 1. We had already started this book of Exodus out about 2 weeks ago. And so we're continuing that story. In chapter 10 and verse 1, I'll read the first sentence, first paragraph, the first verse in Hebrew, and then we'll talk about it in English. Vayomer Yahweh el Moshe bo el Pharaoh ki ani Hakbadi, Badti, Et Levdo, Ve'et Lev Avadav, Laman Shiti, Ototai, Elea Bekirbo. So we'll go back up then and do it in English. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, so that I might show my signs before him. Everybody gets the wrong idea that God only loves Israel. Not true. God revealed himself to Israel at this time, but he also revealed himself to Pharaoh and Egypt. So if God only loves Israel, then why is he worrying about Egypt? Why does he want to produce all these miracles and signs and wonders publicly for the very first time in front of Egypt as well as in front of Israel? So he does love the world. He's not partial to Israel, but Israel is the one that he chose to bring his word forth through so that the world could learn it. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the easier to read Complete Jewish Bible, and let me go back over here and bring it up another way. It's easier for me. There we go. I think that'll be readable. So Yahweh, Adonai is the way our Hebrew people speak the name of Yahweh as Adonai, out of respect for his name and not wanting to accidentally defile it in any way. So Yahweh said to Moshe, Go to Pharaoh, for I have made him and his servants hard-hearted, so that I can demonstrate these signs of mine among them. The first part of these signs were demonstrated to them through the turning of the waters of the Nile to blood, and all the water that was in all the wells and cisterns, and even the water that was in the houses turned to blood when they struck the waters with the staff of Moses. Moses also, his staff was turned into a serpent, and Pharaoh had a lot of magicians, and in the Hebrew the word is kartanim, which I think is funny because it sounds just like cartoon, and that's the way witches have been typically shown, as cartoons, because everybody knows you can't really do magic, right? Well, there are some things that can be done that is like magic, that you can't really tell the difference between that and magic. But the kartunim is the Hebrew or ancient word for the magicians and the, I guess you could say, the wise men of Pharaoh and that religious order. In Pharaoh's order, there were many, many gods. It wasn't just one god. Each god had his purpose. In foreign cultures, they have specialty gods that take care of them. And, for example, Neptune is the god of the oceans, of the seas. And so if you're going to be making a long trip across the oceans, then Neptune would be a god you would want to be familiar with. But what happened here in Exodus is that God began to demonstrate his great superior nature to all the other gods. Where they usually work, it didn't work against Yahweh. We'll see here tonight how many of the things that they were trusting in their gods to protect them from failed them when it came to Yahweh and his powerful word. Yahweh said to Moses and to Pharaoh, I'm a God above all other gods. What do you need another God for? You got me, you know? And so, effectively, he was saying, I'm in charge of Neptune. He can't do anything that I don't let him do, and so on. So, in the beginning of chapter 10, let's just go back, and I wanted to go through some of the references and show you what the plagues were that God brought upon Egypt, and Israel was standing there watching it all. Yahweh said to Moses, I have put you in the place of God to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother will be your prophet. So God is choosing who he's going to use for his prophet and who's going to be the ultimate authority for his actions in Egypt. You're to say everything I order you to, and Aaron your brother is to speak to Pharaoh and tell him and to let the people of Israel leave this land. But I will make them hard-hearted. So he told everybody right up front, I've chosen Pharaoh because he is going to harden his own heart, plus I'm going to harden his heart too. Just so they can learn how powerful Yahweh is. Even though I will increase my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt, Pharaoh will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt and bring my armies, my people, the sons of Israel, out of the land of Egypt with great acts of judgment. Then I will stretch out my hand over Egypt and bring the people of Israel out from among them. The Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh. Now, if you've read this story before, you may already know this, but Israel had come into the land of Egypt sent by God through Joseph. Joseph was one of the sons of Jacob. And so he brought Israel into the land through Joseph. Now, the rest of Israel didn't come to the land yet, but Joseph sent for them when the time was right. And they then became well known and well respected by the pharaohs of Egypt and by the people of Egypt. Then, after all of these miracles and everything took place, Pharaoh had a dream. He had a dream of it came in threes. It's interesting how spiritual things always seem to come in threes. But he dreamed, first of all, that there's our camera operator. Hallelujah. There she is.
Hey there.
You know his name?
Yes, Rowdy.
Rowdy, yeah.
He worked on me.
Oh, he worked on you.
Yeah, on my,
Okay. So anyway, we're doing a little reiteration of what we studied last week so we can get people that weren't with us up to speed. So after all these things took place, Joseph interpreted the dream of Pharaoh, and it turned out that he was going to have 7 years of just huge abundance in the crops that they were growing. And so then after the years of abundance, then they were going to have 7 years of famine that was going to come upon Egypt. And since Pharaoh couldn't interpret the dreams, and none of his magicians or cartoonim, none of them could interpret the dreams. So they were going to, well, anyway, it turned out that the wine server for Pharaoh had been thrown into prison in the same area where Joseph was in prison. And I don't want to go back and recover all that because it'd take a lot more time than I want to spend on it. But he interpreted the visions correctly, and Pharaoh was so blown away because he knew that the answer was right. And he said, We need someone who can take the 7 years of abundance and show us how to use it to our advantage so that we don't starve to death during the 7 years of famine. So Pharaoh said, is there anybody as wise among us as Joseph? And a man of understanding who understands the voice of the God. And so he assigned Joseph to be the one who would be in charge of the storage of the food that's grown in the years of excess. And he put Joseph ahead of himself in how the food was handled. And only by Joseph's word would it be distributed and so on. Well, after that took place, there was another Pharaoh came up in the land to be the leader of Egypt. And he'd never really heard of Joseph or the miracles that he performed in interpreting the dreams and so on. So he began to take advantage of these foreigners who were in his land. The Hebrew people were foreigners to them. And they began to use them as slaves to build Pharaoh's treasure cities. And all of these things caused the forgetting of the great miracle of Joseph's help in getting the country set up to be the wealthiest nation on planet Earth. And because the Pharaoh ended up with all of the proceeds of all of the abundance of harvest that had been taken in. Even among the Egyptians, they all sold all their land to get more seed and food to eat during the beginning of the famine. So the Pharaoh that was there at that time really appreciated Joseph a lot. But this one new one that came in that wasn't familiar with Joseph, he didn't appreciate anybody had the kind of authority and power that was given to Joseph. And so he began to take it away and try to get control of these Hebrews because they were starting to become very populous. Their numbers were growing faster than the Egyptians were. And so the Pharaoh was worried that one of their enemies would come in and make a war against them, and they get these Hebrews to line up with them, and then they could maybe be defeated by these two armies joining together. So anyway, that's the background for the story. And then as we go down, Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, perform a miracle, tell Aaron to take his staff and throw it down in front of the Pharaoh so that it can become a snake. Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh and did this, and as Adonai had ordered. Aaron threw down his staff in front of the Pharaoh and his servants, and it turned into a snake. But Pharaoh, in turn, called for the sages and sorcerers and magicians, and they too, the magicians of Egypt, did the same thing, making use of their secret arts. Each one threw his staff down, and they turned into snakes. So Pharaoh's saying, no big deal, we can do that. But then Aaron's staff turned and ate up all the other snakes and staffs that were thrown down by the crew of Pharaoh. So Aaron's staff swallowed them up. And Adonai said to Moses, Pharaoh is stubborn. He refuses to let the people go. He wants them to go to the wilderness where they can worship him and celebrate a festival unto him. So we go through these things year by year at the Passover time, and we have a book that's called the Haggadah that's got all these stories in it that we can relate to the congregation as a group, and we walk through every year this whole rehearsal of the story of the Passover. Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you to say, let my people go so they can worship me in the desert. But until now you haven't listened. So Yahweh says, this will let you know that I am Yahweh. I will take the staff in my hand and strike the water in the river, and it will turn into blood. The fish in the river will die, the river will stink, and the Egyptians won't want to drink the water from the river. So Adonai, Yahweh said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff, reach out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the rivers and canals, ponds, and all their reservoirs, so that they can turn to blood. There will be blood throughout the whole land of Egypt, even in the wooden buckets and stone jars. So he did this, and Pharaoh got his troop to do the same thing. So he wasn't so impressed. And so then, so the fish in the water died, and it created a stink. But the magicians of Egypt did the same thing with their secret arts, so that Pharaoh was made hard-hearted and didn't listen to him. 7 days after Yahweh had struck the river, Yahweh said to Moses, go into Pharaoh and say to him, here's what Yahweh says, let my people go so they can worship me. If you refuse to let them go, I will strike your territory with frogs. The river will swarm with frogs, and they will go up and enter your palace and then go into your bedroom, into your bed. They will enter your houses of your servants and your people, and they go into your ovens and kneading bowls. The frogs will climb all over you, your people, and your servants. So he's beginning to increase his miracles. So far, I've listed for you 3 plagues that were started. There was a total of 10 plagues, plus the snakes, from the hands of the rods. And so all of these were things that God did to prove that he had the same powers, and more so than the gods of Egypt. Magicians did the same with their arts, or secret arts, brought frogs up into the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, intercede with Yahweh to take away the frogs. His magicians couldn't take the frogs away.
No, they added to them.
Yeah. What?
There we go.
Okay. So anyway, these are things that Pharaoh's just not used to being beaten this way. I'm sure that he had many other nations that came before him, and our God's powerful, and we can show you and demonstrate it. And so they will put curses in the land and then cause them to go away. But they weren't able to do these absolute control like Yahweh did. So here's Pharaoh asking him to please take away the frogs. Moses said to Pharaoh, not only that, but you can have the honor of naming the time when I will pray for you and your servants. And so Pharaoh answered, tomorrow. And Moses said, it will be as you have said, and from this you will learn that Yahweh, our God, has no equal. The frogs will leave you in your homes, and also your servants and your people, and they will stay in the river only. And keep going down here. The frogs all died in Egypt, and it made such a big pile of mess that they stunk. So Adonai said to Moses, say to Aaron, reach out your staff and strike the dust on the ground, and it will become like lice throughout all the land of Egypt. And they did it, and Aaron reached out his hand with his staff, struck the dust on the ground, and there were lice. So there we have lice, and the frogs, of course, and the water turned to blood, and the staffs turning to snakes. The magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God, but Pharaoh was made hard-hearted so that he didn't listen to them, just as Yahweh had said would happen. He's even controlling Pharaoh himself. Yahweh said to Moses, get up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh when he goes out to the water, and say to him, here is what Yahweh says, let my people go so they can worship me. Otherwise you won't. If you don't let my people go, I will send swarms of insects Went the wrong way here. Swarms of insects, and likewise the ground they stand on. The houses of the Egyptians will be full of swarms of insects. But I will set apart the land of Goshen, which is where Israel lived at that time, where my people live. No swarm of insects will be there, so that you can realize that I am Yahweh right here in the land. Yes, I will distinguish between my people and your people, and this sign will happen by tomorrow. And Yahweh did it. Terrible swarms of insects went into Pharaoh's palace, to all his servants' houses. The insects ruined the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Go and sacrifice to your God here in the land." But Moses replied, "It would be inappropriate for us to do that, because the animal we sacrifice to Yahweh our God is an abomination to the Egyptians." And the animal he's speaking of is sheep. The Egyptians hated sheep because they stripped the land nude, eating the nub plumb down to the top of the soil. So the animal we sacrifice to Yahweh our God is an abomination to the Egyptians. And so they said, "No, we will go 3 days' journey into the desert and sacrifice to Yahweh our God, as he has ordered us to do." And Pharaoh said, "I will let you go so that you can sacrifice to Yahweh your God in the desert. Only you are not to go very far away. Intercede on my behalf." Moses said, "All right, I'm going away from you, and I will intercede with Yahweh, so that tomorrow the swarms of insects will leave Pharaoh and his servants and his people. Just make sure that Pharaoh stops playing games with the people by preventing them from going and sacrificing to Yahweh." So you can see Yahweh has had the upper hand all along. Verse 26, Moses left Pharaoh and interceded, and Yahweh did what Moses had asked. He removed the swarms of insects from Pharaoh and his servants and his people. Not one remained. But this time, too, Pharaoh made himself stubborn and didn't let the people go. So now Pharaoh is the one who's making his own heart stubborn. So anyway, a total of 10 plagues were poured out upon Egypt. I'm going to go on down to chapter 10 again now, and we'll begin. I actually would like to bring up my Haggadah and show it to you. I don't have one to bring up. I have one on my other computer, but it's not up and running right now. So God's going to use Pharaoh's hard-heartedness to be one of the signs that shows his people, Israel, that he has authority and power even over all the gods of Egypt. And there are no gods in Egypt that has the kind of power he has. We'll skip on down. Okay, the next one that he did had never been seen in the earth before. And that was rain with hail and fire. And some think that was lightning. Maybe it was. We don't know for sure. But all it would take is a little gasoline or oil thrown on that thing with a match, and you got fire. And that's not certainly impossible for man. Man could do that, so why couldn't God? So he is a God who's created all these things. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, "Here's what Yahweh, God of the Hebrews, says. How much longer will you refuse to submit to me? Let my people go so they can worship me. Otherwise, if you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. One won't be able to see the ground. So completely will the locusts cover it. They will eat anything you still have left that has escaped the hail, including every tree you have grown in the field. They will fill your houses and those of your servants and all the Egyptians, and it will be like nothing your fathers or their fathers have ever seen since the day they were born until today." Then he turned his back and left. Verse 7. Pharaoh's servants said to him, "How much longer must this fellow be a snare for us? Let the people go and worship Yahweh their God. Don't you understand yet that Egypt is being destroyed?" The gods that have protected Egypt all these many centuries is failing them.
Yeah.
That's because Yahweh is much greater than any of their gods.
Mm-hmm.
So Moses and Aaron were brought to Pharaoh again, and he said to them, "Go worship Yahweh your God." But who exactly is going? Moses answered, "We will go with our young and our old, our sons, our daughters, and we will go with our flocks and herds, for we must celebrate a feast unto Yahweh." Pharaoh said to them, "Yahweh will certainly be with you if I ever let you go with your children. It's clear that what you're up to no good. Nothing doing. Just the men among you may go and worship Yahweh. That's what you want, isn't it?" And they were driven out of Pharaoh's presence. Yahweh said to Moses, "Reach out your hand over the land of Egypt so the locusts will invade the land and eat every plant that the hail has left." And Moses reached out with his staff over the land of Egypt, and Yahweh caused an east wind to blow on the land all day and all night. And in the morning, the east wind brought the locusts. The locusts went up over the land of Egypt and settled through Egypt's territory. It was an invasion more severe than there ever had been or ever will be again. They completely covered the ground so that the ground looked black. They ate every plant growing from the ground and all the fruit of the trees left by the hail, and not one green thing remained, not a tree, not a plant in the field, in all the land of Egypt. So you wondered how come there's not much growing green in Egypt? Well, here you go. Pharaoh hurried to summon Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against Yahweh your God and against you. Now therefore please forgive my sin just this once, and intercede with Yahweh on your God, so that he will at least take away from me this deadly plague." He went out from Pharaoh and interceded with Yahweh. Yahweh reversed the wind and made it blow very strong from the west. It took up the locusts and drove them into the sea of the Suf, which is commonly called the Red Sea. Not one locust remained in all the Egyptian soil, but Yahweh made Pharaoh's hard-hearted, and he didn't let the people of Israel go. Yahweh said to Moses, "Reach out your hand toward the sky, and there will be darkness over the land, darkness so thick it can be felt." Moses reached out his hand over the sky, and there was a thick darkness in the entire land of Egypt for 3 days. People couldn't see each other, and no one went anywhere for 3 days. But all the people of Israel had light in their homes. Pharaoh summoned Moses and said, "Go worship Yahweh. Only leave your flock and herds behind. Your children may go with you." And Moses answered, "You must also see to it that we have sacrifices and burnt offerings so that we can sacrifice to Yahweh our God. Our livestock will also go with us. Not a hoof will be left behind, because we must choose some of them to worship Adonai our God. And we don't know which ones we will need to worship Yahweh until we get there." But Yahweh made Pharaoh hard-hearted, and he wouldn't let them go. Pharaoh said to them, "Get away from me, and you had better not see my face again, because the day you see my face, you will die." Moses answered, "Well spoken. I will see your face no more." Yahweh said to Moses, I'm going to bring still one more plague on Pharaoh and Egypt. And after that, he will let you leave here. When he does let you go, he will throw you out completely. Why didn't he want the Hebrew people to leave?
Well, for one thing, they're their slaves. They're building
Free
everything.
labor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly why. They were skilled craftsmen in working with brick, mortar, and the pharaohs had put them to work building his treasure cities. So this plague that he's going to send must be pretty heavy duty, if it's going to cause him to actually throw them out of the country. Now tell the people that every man is to ask of his neighbor and every woman her neighbor for gold and silver jewelry. Yahweh made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people. And moreover, Moses was regarded by Pharaoh's servants and the people as a very great man in the land of Egypt. Moses said, here is what Yahweh says, about midnight I will go out in the land of Egypt. All the firstborn in the land of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne to the firstborn of the slave girls at the handmill, and all the firstborn of the livestock. There will be horrendous wailing throughout all the land of Egypt. There has never been another like it, and there will never be again. Not even a dog's growl will be heard against any of the people of Israel, neither against the people or against the animals. In this way you will realize that Adonai distinguishes between Egyptians and Israel. And all your servants will come down to me and prostrate themselves before me and say, get out, you and all the people that follow you, and after that I will get out. And he went out from Pharaoh in the heat of anger. Yahweh said to Moses, Pharaoh will not listen to you, so that still more of my wonders will be shown in the land of Egypt. Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, but Yahweh had made Pharaoh hard-hearted, and he didn't let the people of Israel leave his land. Yahweh spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, and he said, you are to begin your calendar with this month. It will be the first month of the year for you. Speak to all the assembly of Israel and say, on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb or a kid for his family, one per household. Except that if the household is too small for a whole lamb or kid, then he and his next door neighbor should share one, dividing it in proportion to the number of people eating it. Your animal must be without defect, a male in its first year, and you may choose it from either the sheep or the goats. You are to keep it until the 14th day of the month, and then the entire assembly community of Israel will slaughter it at dusk. Now, there are a lot of things that I would really like to point out here, but I'm going to reserve to just a couple of items that are very intriguing that I would like to help you to see. You don't get some of this stuff by reading a translation. You have to go back into the original language and see what it actually says to see what I'm about to show you. So I will go here and bring up the interlinear Bible so we can see the points that I want to make. He's just got through saying, and you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the month, and you shall kill it. Now, I think it was a previous verse I want to go to, sorry. Yeah, go one more up. Okay, Shet Tamim means a lamb without default, no sickness, no blemish. A male of the first year shall be from the sheep and from the goats. You shall take it out, and then you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the month. So that's a total of 4 days, and shall kill it. The whole assembly shall kill it. Hit the wrong key and went too far. Okay, here's what I wanted to show you. That's the Hebrew I want you to see. And the Hebrew reads, Bain ha-eravim. Bain ha-aravahim. Okay, between the evenings is what that literally says. It's come to be understood at evening because of the usage in reading the text in Israel. They wanted to have a common time when all this was done, where they killed the Passover lambs together. And so they chose the hour around 6 p.m. in the afternoon when they killed the lambs for the Passover Seders. So the people would bring their Passover lambs to the priesthood, and the priest would shachat, which is to cut the throat of the lambs, and then the people would take the lamb from there on back home and prepare it and cook it for the evening meal. But Bain Ereim, Bain means literally between the evenings. Let me see if I can get my marker pen up here. Okay, so here's the word Bain. You would spell that B-E-I-N or B-E-Y-N in English. And it means literally between. Between. And then ha'aravim means the evenings, plural. So every day starts and ends at sunset in Israel, in biblical Hebrew. So Bain ha'aravim means anywhere between the first and the second sunset, it can be slaughtered. And that's important because Yeshua the Messiah and his disciples had a Passover Seder that was obviously based on killing the Passover lamb just before the first evening of the preparation day. So since it can be done anytime between the beginning evening and the closing evening of the preparation day, then if he does it early in the day, in the early morning hours, he still has kept the instruction the way it was written and understood to be kept. So it's still between the evenings. And there are some that claim that Yeshua's disciples did not have a proper Passover because they didn't kill it at the appointed hour, which was 6 p.m. But the Torah itself tells us it can be any time between the evenings. So that's interesting, isn't it, to me? He still kept it lawfully, even if he did it right after breakfast. No problem. Okay, so that's why I say that if you're not reading it in the original language, there are things that get past you that you don't notice. Now we'll go back over to the Complete Jewish Bible. Trying to get an automatic thing to shut up and leave me alone. Okay. So here they've translated it, slaughtered it at dusk, which is leaning towards the evening, but it could be any time during the day. So they're to take some of the blood, and then they're to smear it on the two side posts and the top of the door frame at the entrance of the house in which they eat it. That night they are to eat the meat roasted in the fire. They're to eat it with matzah, which is unleavened bread, and maror, which is bitter herbs. Don't eat it raw or boiled, but roasted in the fire with its head, lower parts of its legs, and its inner organs. Let nothing of it remain until morning. If any of it does remain, burn it up completely. Now this is kind of like a intermission, if you will, or an interlude, where it's taking another part and telling you more about that part so that it comes out in the end in the right order and about the right time for everything that's happening on this day that God plans to do. Verse 11, here's how you're to eat it: with your belt fastened and your shoes on your feet. They call the belt fastening a girding of the waist, of garments. In those days they wore basically robes. And if they had to go somewhere quickly, that robe can get caught on rocks or bushes or whatever as they're running. And so girding their robe would mean they would put their belt around them. They reach in behind and grab the back edge of the robe and bring it up and tuck it into their cloth belt. And it makes like pant legs so that they can now run without being tripped up. It's called girding your waist. Here's how you're to eat it: with your belt fastened, your shoes on your feet, in other words, girding your belt, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you're to eat it hurriedly. It is Yahweh's Passover. For that night I will pass through the land of Egypt and kill all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both men and animals, and I will execute judgment against all the gods of Egypt. He's going to give a summary judgment, if you will, about all of the gods of Egypt, that there's not one of them worth keeping, that all you need is Yahweh. He says, because I am Yahweh, and he's defining himself as the greatest of all the gods. The blood will serve you as a sign marking the house where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over. Hebrew is Pesach, pass over you. When I strike the land of Egypt, the death blow will not strike you. This will be a day for you to remember and celebrate as a festival to Yahweh. From generation to generation, you are to celebrate it by a perpetual regulation. For 7 days you're to eat matzah, and the first day remove the leavening from your house. Whoever eats chametz, which is the leavened bread, it's the fermented portion of the bread that has been filled with air and puffed up. Whoever eats chametz, leavened bread, from the first of the 7th day is to be cut off from Israel. On the 1st and 7th days you are to have assembly set aside for God. On these days no work is to be done except that which must do to prepare his food. You may do only that. You are to observe the festival of unleavened bread, or matzah, for this very day I brought your divisions out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you are to observe this day from generation to generation as a perpetual regulation from the evening of the 14th day of the first month until the evening of the 21st day of the first month. You are to eat matzah. During those 7 days no leaven is to be found in your houses. Whoever eats food with leavening, hametz, in it is to be cut off from the community of Israel. It doesn't matter whether he is a foreigner or a citizen of the land. Nothing with hametz in it wherever you live. You must eat matzah, unleavened bread. So then Moses told them to take their lambs and sacrifice them, and to follow the instruction about painting the blood on the doorposts and mantle of the houses. Now I got to show you this. You've got to, let me see. If you've got a door on the front of your house, it's got a top piece and it's got 2 side posts. So it looks like that. Now, the Hebrew alphabet has a letter that looks just like that. It's called chet. And it means sin. The word chet means sin. And so God told them, take the blood of that lamb and paint it over the header board, the top board, and the side posts. And so what are we doing? Well, we're covering our sin with the blood of the lamb. Yeshua became the lamb that was sacrificed for many. And he was a substitutionary sacrifice for all of us. And so when you follow an instruction of God of this nature, it's the same thing as putting a yud out there on the upper corner of that chet. And it changes the word from chet to chai. Chai means life. So he changes the sin, which produces death, into life by the blood of the Lamb. Very interesting, the features, how they work together in these stories. So the plan is that God's going to kill the Egyptian firstborn children who were not, the houses were not marked with the blood of the Lamb. Well, they weren't at the meeting where it was announced, so how would they know to do that, you know? But he says, when you come into the land which Yahweh will give you, as he has promised, you are to observe this ceremony. When your children ask you, what do you mean by this ceremony? Say, it is the sacrifice of Yahweh's Passover lamb, because Yahweh passed over the houses of the people of Israel in Egypt when he killed the Egyptians but spared our houses. The people of Israel bowed their heads and worshipped. It says that at about midnight, Yahweh killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne to the firstborn of the prisoners in the dungeon, all the firstborn of the livestock. Pharaoh got up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a horrendous wailing in Egypt. For there wasn't a single house without someone dead in it. He summoned Moses and Aaron by night, and he said, up, leave my people, both you and the people of Israel. Go, serve Yahweh as you have said. Take your flocks, your herds, and as you have said, and get out of here. But bless me too. I think maybe Pharaoh became a believer here, don't you? If it wasn't so sad, it would be laughable. Take your flocks and your herds, as you said, and get out of here, but bless me too. I think that's cool. The Egyptians, there's another guy that got saved because of all this story. It was Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. He was a polytheist priest. And when he came to bring Moses' wife
and the children, yeah.
Jethro heard about all these miracles and how God had killed all of destroyed the power of these gods in the eyes of the people. And when he got finished, Jethro told Moses, look, God has shown me that he is greater than all other gods through these stories that you've told me. So Jethro then offered burnt offerings and sacrifices and shared them with Moses and his leaders. And they had a big festival there out in the middle of the desert, celebrating Yahweh. He said, now I know that Yahweh is greater than them all. He believed in Yahweh already. He just didn't know that Yahweh is the greatest of all the gods. So I think that is such a really cool deal. Everywhere people learn about Yahweh, people getting saved. So that's really wild. The people of Israel had done what Moses had said. They had asked the Egyptians to give them silver and gold and jewelry and clothing. And Yahweh made the Egyptians so favorably disposed toward the people that they had let them have whatever they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. The people of Israel traveled from Ramses to Sukkot, some 600,000 men on foot. That's not counting the children and the other adults in the family. A mixed crowd also went up with him. There were a lot of Egyptians who said, man, I want to follow this God. This is a powerful God.
Yeah, I think a lot of people realized it wasn't just all Hebrew.
Yeah.
It wasn't just all the Hebrew that left
but
Egypt.
there was Egyptians and Hebrews coming out of Egypt there.
Yeah.
So they baked unleavened bread from the dough they had brought out of Egypt, since it was unleavened. They had been driven out of Egypt without time to prepare supplies for themselves. And the time the people had lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, they all fluently spoke and understood and read the Egyptian hieroglyphs, right? And so that's the reason why God gave the Torah in hieroglyphs instead of Hebrew. Oh, he gave it in Hebrew, didn't he?
Yeah. Chapter and verse, what?
430 years they lived in the land, and they still didn't.
Yeah, that was a long time.
They could still read Hebrew better than the hieroglyphs. Interesting. So, in verse 43, Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, this is the regulation for the Passover lamb. No foreigner is to eat it, but if anyone has a slave he bought for money, when you have circumcised him, he may eat it. Neither a traveler or a hired servant may eat it. It is to be in one house. You are not to take any of the meat outside the house, and you are not to break any of the bones. The whole community of Israel is to keep it. A foreigner staying with you wants to observe it, Yahweh's Passover. All his males must be circumcised, and then he may take part in and observe it. He will be like a citizen of the land, but no uncircumcised person is to eat it. The same teaching is to apply equally to the citizens of the foreigners living among you. All the people of Israel did just as Yahweh had ordered Moses and Aaron. On that very day, Yahweh brought the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their divisions. Let's see how much more I got to this section.
16. Oh, we're supposed to go to 16? Oh, 13, 16?
Yeah, we're on 13.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's the end of it. I think we can finish this real easy in just a short time here. When Yahweh brings you into the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Hivi, the Jebusi, which he swore to your ancestors to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you're to observe this ceremony in this month. And the month is called the month of Abiv. Now, the Abiv state is the Abiv of the grain, when the inside part of the grain is partially developed, but it's not fully ripe yet. And if you smush it between your thumbnails, it comes kind of squirting out like toothpaste or like cream cheese. And so that's called the Abiv state. And that's the month that we're supposed to be using to observe the festival of Passover. And he says that's the first month. I think I'm going to call this good enough because I kind of feel like I'm losing some of you. So we'll just call this good enough for tonight. Go ahead and finish reading it and look up the New Testament references, because that really ties in with what we're reading here today. And also the Haftarah is Jeremiah 46:13 through 28. Okay, well, we'll call that good enough for tonight. We'll have a little closing ceremony and then be dismissed. I'd like to visit with you a few minutes if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, fantastic.
So, Rabbi, I have a question on the significance of the bones. Is it because, I mean, the Hebrew people are very adamant about the bones not being broken,
Right.
including ours?
Because the animal is no longer unclean, it has a flaw in its body now because it has a broken bone.
Okay, so that was so important for them not to break. Okay.
Good question.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, did you notice that the darkness lasted 3 days and 3 nights?
Yes, just like Yeshua was. It took 3 days.
When they
and 3
killed Yeshua, executed him, the darkness left this world for 3 days.
3
and 3
days
nights.
and 3 nights. That's right.
It's interesting, isn't it? All these things tie together.
Yeah. It's cool.
There's so much more, a lot in here I'd like to have gotten into and dug out, but I didn't think we had the Zeitfleisch for it tonight. Zeitfleisch is like the ability to sit and study for long periods of time. But okay, well, next week we will study Bashalak in sending forth. And it'll be chapter 13, verse 17 through chapter 17, 16. Okie dokie. Well, let's dismiss the study part and then we can visit a little.
We want to thank you for joining us for another delightful evening of our Torah and Customs class. We hope that you can join us again on our Shabbat services, which occur every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Bible's Issues class, followed by our main service, which begins at 11 a.m. with worship, liturgy, and another teaching. If you'd like to learn more about our congregation, please visit our website at tzIon.org, and also check out our yesterday Yochannan Yeshiva. It's free to study, and it's at your own pace. Well, anyways, keep looking forward for our programming, and if you'd like to come by and fellowship and worship with us, let us know it and give us a call at 512-452-8700. We'd love to hear from you. Shalom, shalom.